All throughout the stories of the Bible, there is really a single theme. And the single theme is also the same thing that we have been taught through countless wise sources, the sages, the people that we consider to be inspiring in some way, authors, teachers, thought leaders. All of them really brought one primary message. And it happens to be the same message that is communicated, woven all throughout the text provided by the ancient storytellers that is modernly known as the Bible. And that one single primary message is that human beings, consciousness embodied in the form of being human, is capable of achieving anything that we believe is possible. Anything that our minds can conceive, we can achieve. And the way to achieve anything that our mind can conceive or our heart can desire is to become single-minded in our focus, single-minded in our purpose. And that single-mindedness stems from what we are exploring in today's Sunday Mystery School session, from the realm of fourth dimensional thinking. Because in the realm of fourth dimensional thinking, all things are possible. In fact, they're not only possible, all things in the realm of the fourth dimension already exist. In the realm of fourth dimensional thinking, there is no that which has been in the past or that which will be in the future. There is only one solid whole that contains all possibilities already manifested. And from this, we get the wisdom that is spoken of by Neville and other mystics, summarized in the phrase, creation is finished. From a fourth dimensional perspective, that is true. Creation is finished. Whatever we are dreaming as being possible for ourselves has already been created, already exists. There's nothing new under the sun. It's already a possibility in the mind of God, which is also our realm of infinite potential, because we are consciousness, and consciousness is infinite potential. Now, the 3D mind, which is our normal, natural, everyday human mind, as we are living in the realm of the senses, those 5 senses, which are illustrated in the Bible in all sorts of different ways, but it's always 5 of them to signify that really it's our senses. It's the 5 covered porches in the story of the man laying by the pool, the lame man that Jesus healed by the pool. It's the 5 husbands of the woman at the well, Samaritan woman at the well that Jesus meets, right? That realm of living, that realm of perceiving, that realm of thinking that is dominated by the 5 senses is by very nature, by very definition, limited to what we can perceive with our 5 senses. And this is why we must use our imagination to connect to the realm of greater possibility, which is in truth unlimited possibility or infinite possibility. We use our imagination to connect to that realm, and then we use single-pointed purpose, a sense of single-mindedness, where we choose, we select from that realm of infinite potentials, we select what it is that we will conceive, right? Whatever the mind of man can conceive can be achieved, right? Conceive, conception. We conceive of an idea, and that idea, realm of the 4th dimension, has already been created. It already exists. And from the perspective of the 3rd dimension, we cannot measure it or register it using our 5 senses yet. And so we build a bridge between what is currently registered by our 5 senses and what we will become by setting our single-minded focus upon it, We build that bridge using our imagination. Now, this is the concept that has been illustrated over and over again throughout the stories of the Bible. The Bible is constantly reminding us of our own personal power, our own personal creative power, because in truth, we are consciousness wearing a human form. And so naturally, all things are possible to us. But when we allow 3D realm of thinking, which is really our five senses of limitation, if we allow those five senses, if we allow those limitations to convince us what is possible, meaning to convince us that only what we can see is what is possible for us, then we continue to live in our limitation, or as in the words of the Bible, the way the Bible says this, we will die in our sins, right? But if we set with a single-mindedness, again, you can't live in both worlds. You have to move in your imagination to the place where that possibility already exists, and you have to give it life and presence in your consciousness. And you do that, of course, through your imagination. When you do that, you transcend what you can measure with your five senses, and you begin to live in a new possibility. And this is what the Bible has been telling us. And this is also what, again, all of those inspired thought leaders throughout the ages have told us. All of the great composers, all of the great artists, right? Walt Disney comes to mind. I mean, in how many Disney movies is this idea of what you dream and believe you can receive, be, and experience? Right? This is part of the human mythology, but the mythology is not a myth in that it is false. Rather, the mythology is an animation of the idea in a way that hopefully it'll plant itself into our minds, that it will become alive in our minds, that we will begin to actually animate our possibility. Welcome to Sunday Mystery School. We are continuing today's lesson with Neville Goddard's original Masterclass, and we are on lesson 3 of this 5-lesson Masterclass, and he titled lesson 3, Thinking Fourth Dimensionally. Thinking fourth dimensionally. So this is this idea of learning to transcend what we can see, feel, hear, taste, touch, smell, 5 senses, learning to transcend those 5 porches, transcend those 5 husbands, right? The list of analogies and metaphors goes on and on and on. We can transcend that and begin to think from this higher dimensional perspective where all that our mind can conceive, we can achieve. Okay, so Neville is going to teach this in a metaphysical and specifically the sense of being a mystic. Okay, but it's important that we understand these ideas are not unique to mystics. They're actually part of our human heritage and have been passed down through countless traditions because there's one truth that unites us all. And the story is told many, many different ways, but it really, at the end of the day, is one truth. And it unites every sentient being. Every being who is aware of being is consciousness having an experience. And every spark, every individuated child of consciousness, every child of God, which is not limited only to the human form, that's every sentient being who is aware of being, is a child of that one substance, that one source, that one consciousness that is all. And this truth that sets us free, this truth that is the sacred essence of our being, unites all beings in this very profound and beautiful way. We're going to explore this way deeper today. But first, before we do that, I'm going to take this opportunity to speak a blessing over all beings. from a place of oneness, gratitude for this beautiful experience that we get to share together in this gorgeous universe in which we live, and also just simply because we can. I invite you to join me now. I'm going to speak the blessing, and we're going to get into Neville's teaching. I turn now to go within, drawing my senses inward into the center of my own being. I offer gratitude and appreciation in this moment for the perfection that is this present moment. In gratitude, we accept that we are, and we declare that we are wise souls, growing healthy, youthful minds. Thank you that we are feeling now the presence of life force energy, awakening, enlivening, and making whole our bodies in the physical dimension. Thank you that our relationships are now healed with love, compassion, and understanding. Thank you that we have humbly accepted our power and our responsibility to imagine wisely as sovereign co-creators of the world we share. Thank you that we are now inspired by life-expanding, consciousness-uplifting possibilities manifesting now. We honor the ancestors, those who have walked this path ahead of us. We feel their presence with us now. And we also acknowledge that we are also the ancestors. Thank you for the wisdom passed down from the ancients, woven into the fabric of reality and into our stories all around us in the spirit of liberating our hearts and our minds. And thank you that together we welcome the inheritance of our bright and beautiful future. And so it is. Okay. We're going to continue with Neville's lesson 3. And this segment of lesson 3 is actually going to conclude lesson 3. So we're going through that last little bit of Neville's original lesson, and it really is a summary. So in order to really effectively deliver the summary, we're going to do a brief review just to make sure that we are sufficiently present to the teaching to be able to receive the summary. So going now to the text. I'm going to do a little bit of a review. Okay, so Neville has shared a couple of Bible stories in this lesson that illustrate this idea of thinking fourth dimensionally, thinking from this realm of, well, really anything is possible. And it doesn't really matter whether I can somehow see it or perceive it, right? When I say see it, I really mean like interact with it in a physical 3D sense. It doesn't matter if I can do that now. The point is that it's possible, and whatever I see now, I realize came out of believing in a possibility before, right? So it's like whatever I see right now in my reality is evidence of what I was imagining previously, okay? And so whatever I will see tomorrow is evidence of what I was imagining today. And that cycle, that thread just continues to be pulled through our entire life. Okay. So it's like every single day, what we see is evidence of what we've been imagining. And then what we'll see tomorrow is evidence of what we imagine today. Okay. So it's like this idea of fourth dimensional thinking is learning to accept that this is true, and not only accept that this is true, but rather allow this enlightened reason. Okay. So the enlightened reason, meaning that our ability to perceive that this is the way that the universe, which is consciousness reflecting back to us our state of being, our ability to perceive that this is the way it works should meaningfully upgrade our life. It should. If we're not hearers of the word only, but doers of what we have heard, then we hear the truth of the fourth dimension. And then we begin to do in alignment with what enlightened reason tells us to do. So enlightened reason tells us, well, if you have a desire, assume its fulfillment and begin to live and act and walk as though you are the person that you have a desire to be. Okay, now this idea was clothed in drama and told over and over and over and over and over and over again throughout the Bible, and really in inspired texts, whether religious or spiritual or not. The same ideas, just permeates. As the blessing said, it's woven into the fabric of reality all around us. And we're grateful for that, because without it literally being told everywhere we look, we would die in our sins. We wouldn't know that we had the opportunity to transcend the 3D without enlightened reason becoming present in our awareness and showing us the truth of the realm of the 4D. So these stories, in particular, the ones that Neville shares in this chapter, there's a couple of them. So he talks about the insane man hiding behind the tombstones, which represent the dead facts of life. Remember in the introduction, I said, whatever I can perceive right now in my 3D reality is evidence of what I've been imagining in the past, right? So whatever I believed was true about myself in the past is now hardened into what I'm living in right now. And if I don't like it, I can now change my assumption, and then the same thing will be true tomorrow. Whatever I'm now believing that I am is going to harden into my fact, into my tomorrows, okay? So this insane man who's hiding among the tombstones, this insane man is screaming and hitting himself over the head with the stones, which are the facts of life, right? So it's like whatever I've manifested from my 3D level of thinking, whatever I believe to be true about myself, has hardened into fact. And so if I remain bound to the perceived limitations of facts, well, it's a fact. Look at it. I can see it. It's right here. I can hold it in my hand. I can taste it, smell it, maybe talk to it, right? Maybe it's a person. Maybe I manifested a person. I can talk to this person. Look, they're here. They're a fact, right? I can hit myself over the head, metaphorically speaking, with these facts and say, look how bad this reality is, or look how unable I am to transcend the facts. Okay, this is the insane man screaming, hiding among the tombstones, the dead things, right? They're dead because they already were, right? They're evidence of, you could say the world around you is dead in a manner of speaking. It's like that's what I was imagining. Right now, I can continue to imagine it and keep it alive, right? Or I can choose to imagine something new, and then whatever is will die and pass away. And whatever I'm now imagining to be true will rise and walk in its place. Okay? So, insane man, demon possessed, right? He's of multiple minds. There's multiple spirits in him. He's not single-minded purpose. He's got this thing telling him all the reasons why he can't be this way. He's got this other voice telling him all the reasons why he can't be this other way. He's got, stones hitting, facts hitting him over the head, reminding him why he's so small and crazy. And of course, this insane man, demon-possessed man, sees enlightened reason, personified in this story as Jesus, coming towards him. And what does he do? He runs and he pleads with enlightened reason, please do not heal me. I want to be bound by my limitation, right? He's arguing for his limitations. And of course, enlightened reason will hear nothing of that. So enlightened reason casts out the demons, and then the man becomes clothed, right? Clothed. So clothed, wearing the costume of his desire, right? So it's like you become clothed in the person that you desire to be. You wear that person like a costume. So clothed, sitting at the feet of the master, right? Sitting at the feet, which is understanding, sitting at the feet of the master. So now you come into alignment, right? This insane man, which is you and I, when we are living in the world of our limitations, we now become clothed, seated at the feet of the master, and back in our right mind. And that right mind is a single-minded focus. One purpose. One purpose. It's no longer multiple spirits telling us multiple stories. And spirits are just perspectives or elements of our personality. They're reminding us of our limitations. Okay, it's not that, that's all it is. So those spirits can be cast out and we can have one mind, one mission, one focus, and that is to be the person that we desire to be. So that's one of the stories that Neville is sharing that illustrates this idea. He also talks about the woman at the well. The woman at the well, Jesus says, excuse me, I need to grab some water. One second. You got to drink that living water. Jesus says, give me something to drink. And the Samaritan woman, she has all kinds of reasons why this should not be the case. Right? She says, oh, you don't have a rope. You don't have a bucket. How are you going to get your water? Right? This is, again, arguing for limitations. Okay, so that's another story. And then Neville goes on, and Neville starts sharing his own personal stories. And these stories are modern, but they're the same story that is told in the Bible. A modern personification of the same story, right? And this is one of the ways that the stories of the Bible really start to come alive. Because we understand what is actually being communicated. So in this case, Neville goes to Abdullah and says, I have this desire. Okay, this is the lame man laying on the porch, the five senses. Lame, right? Five senses, limited by the five senses. And Jesus says, do you want to be healed? Okay, so Neville goes to Abdullah. Abdullah, in this case, is going to play the part of Jesus. Neville's going to play the part of the lame man. Neville says, I have this desire to go to Barbados. And Abdullah says, do you really want to go to Barbados? Which is Jesus saying, do you really want to be healed? Neville says, yeah, I do want to go to Barbados. So Abdullah, Jesus says, you're in Barbados, which is the same as saying, pick up your sleeping mat and walk. It's the same story. In this case, it's Neville in Barbados. In the biblical story, it's personified or dramatized in the form of a man laying on porches being lame. Laying on the porches of the five senses. It's important to point that out. Okay, so you can start to see how really there's just one story being told. And we're learning how to apply the wisdom that is woven into these tales into our own awareness so that it may meaningfully upgrade our quality of life by teaching us the manner through which we become the person that we desire to be. Okay, so we're going to now move into the summary. The summary is down, if you're following along in the text, which is linked On the YouTube, we are on page. Oh yeah, it starts at page 1. Okay, so I cut out just the summary. Yeah, so we're on page 1. The link is in the YouTube description if you want to follow along with the text. Okay, so Neville says, now back to the significance of our 2 Bible stories. The well is deep. You have no bucket. You have no rope. It is 4 months to the harvest, and Jesus says, I have meat to eat you know not of. I am the bread of heaven. Feast on the idea. Become identified with the idea as though you were already that embodied state. Walk in the assumption that you are what you want to be. And if you feast on that and remain faithful to that mental diet, you will crystallize it. You will become it in this world. When I came back to New York in 1934, after 3 heavenly months in Barbados, because remember, Neville manifested the trip to Barbados using Abdullah as enlightened reason, right? So Neville had the desire. He came to enlightened reason, played by the part of Abdullah. And he said, I have this desire. I want to be in Barbados. And of course, Abdullah said, you are in Barbados. So Neville went to Barbados. And when he went to Barbados and he manifested his trip in this way, he came back a different man because he realized that the truth was within him. It was not something he had to earn through his behavior. He realized that it was not a matter of being holy as the world would describe being holy. You know, before Neville left and he went to Barbados, he was vegetarian. He was, he didn't drink, he didn't smoke, he was celibate. He was trying to earn the right to be saved. He was trying to earn holiness through his behavior. And Abdullah said, this is crazy. You don't need to do that. Enlightened reason, right? You don't need to do that. And so Neville proved the law by manifesting his trip to Barbados. And so in Barbados, he gave up his diets. He drank. He says, I drank, I smoked, and did everything I had not done in years. I remember what Abdullah had said to me, after you have proven this law, you will become normal, Neville. You will come out of the graveyard. You will come out of the dead past where you think you are being holy. For all you are really doing, you're being so good, but you are really being good for nothing. Neville says, I came back walking this earth a completely transformed person. From that day, which was February 1934, I began to live more and more. I cannot honestly tell you I have always succeeded. My many mistakes in this world, many past failures would convict me if I told you that I have so completely mastered the movements of my attention that I can at all times remain faithful to the idea that I want to embody. But I can say with the ancient teachers, although I have seemed to fail in the past, I move on and I strive day after day to become that which I want to embody in this world. And may this same thing also be said of each of us, that even though we seem to have failed in the past, which is normal. I mean, even the ancient storytellers spoke of this. It's like all you have to do ever is your best. And that means you keep the faith and you strive day after day to become what you desire to embody in this world. You suspend your judgment. You refuse to accept what reason, what your senses, what those 5 husbands and 5 porches dictate to you as being true about your life. You remain faithful to the new diet, and you will become the embodiment of the ideal to which you remain faithful. Neville says, if there's one place in the world that is unlike my little island of Barbados, it is New York City. In Barbados, the tallest building is 3 stories, and the streets are lined with palm trees and coconut trees and all sorts of tropical things. In New York City, you must go to a park to find a tree. Yet I had to walk the streets of New York as though I walked the streets of Barbados. To one's imagination, all things are possible. I walked, feeling that I was actually walking the streets of Barbados. And in that assumption, I could almost smell the odor of the coconut-lined lanes. I began to create within my mind's eye the atmosphere I would physically encounter were I in Barbados. As I remained faithful to this assumption, somebody canceled passage and I received it. My brother in Barbados, who never thought about Neville coming home, all of a sudden had this commanding urge to write me a strange letter. He had never dictated to me, but this time he did. He dictated. And he thought that it was he who had originated the idea of my visit. I went home. I had 3 heavenly months. I returned first class and brought back quite a sum of money in my pocket, a gift. My trip, if I had paid for it, would have been $3,000. Yet I did it without a nickel in my pocket. So I think it was our last Sunday Mystery School session. I was talking about how Neville got a check from his brother for $50. And I was like, oh, 1929, you could probably buy a car for $50. Okay, so that's not entirely true. You couldn't buy a car. You could buy a lot of things, not quite a car, but $3,000, you could definitely buy a car. Probably 2 cars, actually. So that was like, okay, he had nothing, right? Is the beginning of close to the Great Depression, right? He had nothing. He felt like he was a failure, so he's in a low state, and he moved himself to where he wanted to be. And literally everything else fell into place. He manifested his first class trip both ways without a nickel in his pocket, per his own testimony, right? Not a nickel in his pocket, $3,000 trip. For us, today, that's probably a $30,000 trip, right? So it's like simply by assuming, consciousness takes care of the rest. That's I of myself can do nothing. My Father in me does the work. Okay. I can't consciously, as a local embodied human being, tunnel into someone else's mind and implant an idea to bring me to Barbados. But what I can do is assume that I'm in Barbados and allow consciousness, which can do all things, to take care of the details for me. And that's exactly what all of the ancient storytellers tell us to do. I have ways you know not of. My ways are past finding out. That's the Father speaking. That's consciousness speaking. Okay. Our job here, while we're in a physical human form, is to enjoy being a physical human. And that means we should not try to concern ourselves with the how. Okay, that's not our job. We are retired from the how. Okay, we are in retirement from the how because we're in a physical form. Okay, we can allow the non-physical aspect of our being to go to work, right? And when we try to work out the how, we are depriving the non-physical part of our being, which, by the way, is all things, its source. The non-physical part of what we are right now is everything. Okay, so we're depriving what is everything and has all of the possible means of fulfillment from doing its job. When we, in our local human form, using our tiny little squishy brains, try to figure out how something will be. Okay, it's very twisted, and we're patterned, we're habituated into doing it that way, and that's fine until it's no longer fine and we make a new decision. Okay, and so this is the invitation to make a new decision. This is the invitation to trust the Father or consciousness or the universe that is the non-physical aspect of each one of our individuated human beings, to trust it to handle the how. We just do our job, which is to live and perhaps most importantly, sleep in the feeling of being the person we desire to be. Neville says, the dimensionally greater self, which is, by the way, everything, took my assumption, my sleeping and even just sleeping, he was even waking. He was literally walking down the streets of New York and he was in Barbados in his imagination. All that is took that assumption as a command and influenced the behavior. All that is went and implanted that idea in the mind of his brother to write that letter. All that is went and influenced circumstances and situations so that someone canceled their passage so that Neville could have a first-class ticket, as well as everything else. All of the things that were necessary that would tend towards the production of the idea with which I was identified, the Father in me did that work. I was identified with the feeling of being there. I slept as though I were there. And the entire behavior of all men was molded in harmony with my assumption. I did not have to go down to the transport company, Furnace Withy & Co. I didn't have to beg them for passage, asking them to cancel someone who was already booked. I didn't have to write my brother a letter and say, hey, will you please send me some money or buy me a ticket to come home? My brother thought that the idea came from his own mind because Source planted it there. Neville says, actually, to this day, he still believes it was his idea. My old friend Abdullah, who in this case was embodying Jesus, enlightened reason, fourth dimensional thinking, simply said to me, you are in Barbados, Neville. Take up your sleeping mat and walk, lame man. You want to be there? Wherever you want to be, there you are. Live as though you are, and that you shall be. Live as though you are is take up thy sleeping mat and walk. Walk as though you are. You are healed. Live as though you are, and that you shall be. These are the two outlooks on the world possessed by everyone. I don't care who you are. Every child born of a woman, regardless of race or nation or creed, regardless of indoctrination or training or habitual patterns of thinking, everyone possesses two distinct outlooks on the world. You are either the natural person who receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, because to you they seem to be foolishness. Okay, so there's an aspect in each one of us that looks around the world and says, well, what I can see is what is real, and anything beyond that is foolishness. It's foolish for me to believe that anything could be different because look at all the reasons why things are the way they are. Okay, so that's the natural mind or the 3D mind. Or you could be the spiritual mind, the fourth dimensional mind, who perceives things outside of the limitations of the senses, because all things are now realities in source, in consciousness, which contains all things. And this higher dimensional focus says there's no need to wait for the harvest. We don't have to wait for things to change in the 3D in order for us to become what we want to be. Okay, that's the idea of the harvest. Okay, we don't have to wait for things to be harvested in the 3D in order to graduate and become what we have desired to be. In the 4D, we already are that. So let's use the fourth dimension and quantum leap into being that. Neville says, we are now at the top of page 3. He says, you are either the woman of Samaria or you are Jesus at the well. The woman of Samaria was in 3D thinking. Jesus at the well, of course, represents fourth dimensional thinking. You are the man waiting on the 5 porches for the disturbance and someone to push him in. Or you are the one who can command yourself to rise and walk in spite of the others who wait. Are you the man behind the tombstones in the cemetery, waiting and begging not to be clean because you do not want to be cleansed of your prejudices? One of the most difficult things for man to give up is his superstitions, his prejudice. He holds on to these as though they were the treasure of treasures. When you do become cleansed and you are free, then the wound that is your own mind is automatically healed. It becomes the prepared ground where seeds, which are your desires, can take root and grow into manifestation. The child you now bear in your heart is your present objective. Your present longing is a child that is though it were sick. You assume you are now what you would like to be, and the child for a moment becomes dead because there is no disturbance anymore, right? So when you have a desire for something, and you're sitting here and it looks like the desire is over there, and you feel that there's a gap between what you would like to be and what you currently are, you're disturbed because you're like, look what I don't have. Okay, so that's a disturbance. It also creates this magnetism, right? Because there's now this pull of desire, right? Because you feel like there's this gap. Once you choose to believe that you are that, that magnetism disappears. The desire is extinguished because there is no longer separation. You can't say, oh, I'm here and look at that over there. Wouldn't that be nice? Now you and that thing over there merge into one, and you're like, I am this. I don't have it like, I don't have this magnetic pull towards it because it's here, right? Like magnets, when you separate them, you really feel the pull, but when they're collapsed, like they're just, together, right? So you're just together, like with your desire, you are now that desire. So that magnetic force seems to disappear. And to the outside, someone who may know of your desire might think that you just gave up on it. Like you just don't want it anymore because it's almost like the fire went out. It's like that magnetic pull vanished. And that is dramatized in the story of the child being dead, right? So it's like the child is sick. Remember the Pharisee comes to Jesus, hey, my child is sick. Will you come heal her? Okay. And then he gets to the house and the Pharisee's like, you're too late. The child's dead. Okay. And then Jesus goes up into the room with his 12 disciples, closes the door to the mocking crowd. Mocking crowd is just the evidence of the senses saying, look at all these things that are facts proving that what you desire is not alive. Okay. Closes the door, brings his disciples in, meaning his disciplined states of mind. He's disciplined about what he feeds his imagination. And he says, this child isn't dead. He's merely sleeping. Rise and walk. Give this child something to eat, right? Okay. The child you now bear in your heart is your present objective, and your present longing is a child as though it were sick. If you assume that you are now what you would like to be, the child for a moment becomes dead because there is no disturbance anymore. You cannot be disturbed when you feel you are what you want to be, because if you feel that you are what you used to want to be, you are now satisfied. To others who judge superficially, you seem no longer to have the desire. So to them, the desire or the damsel, this female child, is dead. They think you have lost your ambition because you no longer discuss your secret ambition. You've completely adjusted yourself to the idea. You have assumed that you are what you want to be. She is not dead, but she sleepeth. I go to awaken her. As I walk in the assumption that I am, I quietly awaken the desire, the child. Then, when she awakens, I do the normal, natural thing. I give her to eat. I will not brag about it. I don't go and tell others. I go and tell no man. I feed this state, not with the attention of others. I feed it with my own attention. I keep it alive within my world by becoming attentive to it. Things that I'm not attentive to will fade and wither in my world, regardless of what they are. They are not just born and then remain unfed. I gave them birth by reason of the fact that I became conscious of being them. When I embody them within my world, that is not the end. That is just the beginning. Now I am a mother who must keep alive this state by being attentive to it. This is nurturing that dream, nurturing that desire, nurturing that new state. They call it living the dream, right? Because if it's just a dream, then it's like that thing that's over there and you're feeling over here, you feel there's a gap. But when you're living the dream, then you and your dream are one. Okay? So you are nurturing that dream by being it and feeding your attention upon it. The day I am not attentive to my dream, I have withdrawn my milk or my nurturing, my cultivation of the state from it. And it begins to fade from my world as I move my attention and become aware of something else. Now, this can be not what we want if the dream that we are withdrawing attention from is our ideal state. And this can also be a blessing and a savior for us if we are currently animating something that we no longer want to animate. Meaning, if there's a state that we have become that we no longer wish to be, we withdraw our attention from it, and that life-sustaining force of our attention, the nutrients, Neville's referring to it as the milk of the mother, the nutrients that we are feeding it, which is really our attention, have withdrawn from it, and it will begin to fade away from our world and be replaced by whatever we refocus our attention upon. You can either be attentive to the limitations and feed these and make them mountains. If you are throwing your attention into what appears to be your limitation, you're just going to make it bigger and bigger and bigger. It's going to limit you more and more because you're focused on it. Or you can become attentive to your desires. But to become attentive, you must assume that you are already what you want it to be. Although today we speak of a 3D and 4D focus, do not think for one moment these ancient teachers were not fully conscious of these two distinct centers that are of thought in the minds of all people. They may not have called them 3D and 4D. They may have called them names of people, and then Jesus was typically the enlightened state, right? So they may have given them other names, other dramatizations. We just understand it from a dimensional focus. The ancient teachers personified these two, and they tried to show that the only thing which robs us of the people that we could become, people that we can be, is our habit. Habit is not a law. But every psychologist will tell you that habit really is an inhibiting or binding force. Habit restricts us and binds us and makes us blind to what otherwise we could be. So really what Neville is saying, and I think that a lot of teachers would like all teachers really who are truth teachers would say that this is absolutely true. We are only what we are at the moment that we are it because it's a habit. We have a habit of belief about what and who we are. Our identity is a habitual belief. Someone who gets hit on the head and has a change of identity, that proves that point, right? It broke the habit. There's a pattern interrupt. Habit is a pattern. Pattern interrupt breaks the habit. Okay, so this, you have someone who's had the habit of being a certain identity for 40 years and then gets smacked on the head. And then next thing you know, they've got a new identity, a new habit because the old habit was broken. Really, it's just habit that's keeping us being who we are. We have the opportunity to change that habit, right? Not once. It's something we do once. It's something that we change the habit. So we become habitually a new person. habitually a new state, habitually a new version of ourselves. Begin now to mentally see and feel yourself as that which you want to be, and feast upon that sensation morning, noon, and night. I have scoured the Bible for a time interval that is longer than 3 days, and I have not found it. Jesus answered and said unto them, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. Prepare you victuals, for within 3 days you shall pass over this Jordan, to go in to possess the land, which the Lord your God giveth you to possess. 2 examples of 3 days. Now, this idea of 3 days is actually codified into our law here in the Western Hemisphere as the 3-day right of rescission. Most, at least states, have a law where when you sign a contract, you have 72 hours or 3 days to unsign the contract and cancel. So it's like this whole cool off period, right? Cooling down period or whatever. So it's like if you make a purchase, you have 3 days to get out of it. If you sign an employment contract, you have 3 days to get out of it. You sign any type of thing, you have 3 days, right? So it's like after 3 days, it is done. Okay. So like that's just taking a biblical concept and codifying it into law. Okay. And it's not even a biblical concept, it's a spiritual concept, right? So the laws of man are meant to imitate the laws of God. If I completely saturate my mind with one sensation, this is the idea of the single-minded point of focus. If I completely saturate my mind with one sensation and walk as though it were already a fact, I am promised, and I can't find any denial of this promise in this great book. I am promised I do not need more than a 3-day diet if I remain faithful to it. But, Neville says, I must be honest about this. Meaning, it's not Neville being honest, he's saying each of us must be honest about this. If we change our diet during the course of the day, we're going to extend the time interval. Okay, so if we're feasting only on a single-minded sensation, like we simply one idea and it dominates our mind, and we remain faithful to that diet, that's the only thing, we allow it to consume us fully, 3 days. But if we're wishy-washy, and one moment we feel that we are, and the next one we're hitting ourselves over the head like the crazy man hiding behind the tombstones with facts of life, look at all the reasons why it can't be, that's going to extend the interval. Hence the importance of single-mindedness. Neville says, you ask me, how do I know about the interval? Well, you yourself determine the interval. We have today in our modern world a little word which confuses most of us. I know it confused me until I dug deeper. The word is action. Action. Action is supposed to be the most fundamental thing in the world. It is not an atom. It is even more fundamental than an atom. It is not even like an electron. It is even more fundamental than an electron. They call it the fourth dimensional unit. The most fundamental thing in the world is action. You may ask, well, what is action? Neville says our physicists have told us that action is energy multiplied by time. We become more confused and we say energy multiplied by time. Well, what does that mean? And the physicists would say, well, there is no response to a stimulus, no matter how intense the stimulus is, unless it endures for a certain length of time. There must be a minimum endurance or length of time to the stimulus, or there will be no response. On the other hand, There is no response to time unless there is a minimum degree of intensity. Today, the most fundamental thing in the world is called action, or simply energy multiplied by time. The Bible gives it as 3 days. The duration is 3 days for a response in this world. If I would now assume that I am what I want to be, and if I am faithful to it, and walk as though I were, the very longest stretch given for its realization is 3 days. If there's something tonight that you really want in this world, then experience in imagination what you would experience in the flesh. Were you to realize your goal and deafen your ears and blind your eyes to all that denies the reality of your assumption. If you do this, you would be able to tell me before I leave this city of Los Angeles that you have realized what you had is only a wish when you first came here, when you first heard the gospel, the good news. What is the gospel? Good news. The good news is simply that you can be whatever you desire to be. In fact, even that quote, whatever the mind of man can conceive, it can achieve. That is the good news. That is good news. You are not limited by what you see in front of you now. That is the good news. Neville says, "It will be my joy to rejoice with you in the knowledge that the child which was seemingly dead is now alive." This damsel really was not dead. She was only asleep. You fed her in this silence because you have meat no one else knows of. You gave her food, and she became a resurrected living reality within your world. Now you can share your joy with me, and I can rejoice with you. The purpose of these lessons is to remind you of the law of your own being, the law of consciousness. You are that law. Previously, you may have been unconscious of the operation of this law, even though this is fundamental to your being. And maybe we fed and kept alive things which we did not wish to express within this world. But now we can take Neville's challenge. We can take the challenge of all mystics, of all great teachers. They give us a challenge. They give us a philosophy and they ask us, put it to the test. If it does not work, then don't use it as a comforter. If it is not true, get rid of it, discard it. I know it is true. And you will also know it is true once you try it. And you won't know that it is true until you try it. You must try to either prove this law or you must try to disprove this law. Until you try, you are being only a hearer of the word. You must be a doer to truly know. Neville says too many of us have joined isms, which is his keyword for various religious organizations or frames of thinking, philosophies. Too many of us have joined isms, and we are afraid to put them to the test because we feel we might fail. And then what do we have? So maybe we don't really want to know the truth because we hesitate to be bold enough to put it to the test. We say, I know it would work somehow, but I don't really want to test it because as long as I haven't disproved it, I can be comforted by it because it's like a backup plan that gives me comfort. Neville says, do not fool yourself and do not think for 1 second that you are wise if this is your perspective. You must prove or disprove this law. I know that if you attempt to disprove it, you're going to prove it. And I will be richer for you having proved it. Not in dollars, not in things, but because you become the living fruit of what it is that I am teaching. It is far better to have you a successful, satisfied person after these 5 lessons of instruction than to have you go out dissatisfied. I hope you will be bold enough to challenge this instruction and prove it or disprove it. Now, listen carefully. We're going to discuss exactly what the process is. And I know many of us have heard this time and time again, but listen carefully, listen intentfully, because we're going to practice this. And we must know what it is that we are practicing. Neville says, before we go into the silence period, I shall briefly explain the technique again. There are 2 techniques that you can use to apply this law, just 2. Everyone here must know exactly what they want. You must know that if you do not get it tonight, you will still desire it tomorrow just as much as you desire it right now. Now, this is Neville's way of saying, make sure it is an enduring desire, or another way of saying this is a true desire. A true desire that comes from consciousness itself, desiring to express a possibility through you, not the fleeting desire of some sort of surface level appetite or ego, right? True desire, one that is motivated by a source greater than yourself, desire of the Father. Father in me desires to express through me this possibility. It's Neville's way of saying, like, make sure you're still going to want this tomorrow, even if you don't get it tonight. This is not something that you use, just over what you're interested in the next 5 minutes. It's something that you use about what you desire to express as an individuated unit of consciousness. This is a sacred thing. You know what you want. Construct in your mind's eye a single simple event, which implies fulfillment of your desire. An event where you are the primary actor. Your personal action is the dominant element of the scene. Instead of sitting back and watching something happen as though you were on the screen, you must be the actor in the drama. Restrict the event to one single action. If you are going to shake a hand, because shaking that hand implies fulfillment of your desire, then do that, and do that only. Do not shake hands and then wander off in your imagination to some dinner party or some other place. Just shake the hand and do it over and over again until you actually feel like you're really shaking a hand. If you feel you cannot remain faithful to a single action, define your objective and then condense the idea into a single phrase, a phrase which implies the fulfillment of your desire, such as, isn't it wonderful? Isn't it wonderful? Or, thank you. If I felt thankful that someone was instrumental in helping my desire come to pass, I could say thank you, thanking this person, right? Thank you. Or someone's telling you congratulations, thank you. Again, single act, repeating thank you over and over again, like a lullaby, until your mind, your awareness, which is consciousness, which is the awareness of source, is dominated with this single idea, single-mindedness. We will now sit quietly with the idea, which implies fulfillment of our desire, condensed into a single phrase or to a single act. We will relax and immobilize our physical bodies. Then we will experience in imagination the sensation, which our condensed phrase or action affirms. If you imagine yourself shaking another person's hand, do not use your physical hand. Let it remain immobilized. But imagine that housed within your physical hand is a more subtle, yet even more real hand, which can be extracted in your imagination, meaning you can feel your hand, but feel the imaginary version of your hand and shake with that hand. This is his way of subtly switching our focus from 3D. So if we're sitting in the silence and our hands going up and down, we're still in the 3D, right? The whole point is to move into the 4D. So keep your hand still, find your imagination hand, which is your fourth dimensional hand, and shake the hand using that hand. Put your imaginary hand into the imaginary hand of your friend who stands before you and feel that handshake. Keep your physical body immobilized, even though you become mentally active in what you are now about to do. Okay. As Neville always ends his lessons, there is a silence period. I am going to head into the mastermind in the Zoom room. We're going to do this silence period together. So if you're in the Zoom room, stay where you are. I'll be with you, and we are going to do this exercise together in practice. And for those of you on YouTube, thank you so much for joining me. Look forward to beginning lesson 4 next week. And until then, imagine wisely, my friends. We will see you in the next.